So society basically tells us that, losing your temper is this massive character flaw. Like if you get mad, it's a sign that you're immature or uncontrolled or just a hothead, right?
Right, yeah. That's the default assumption we all make.
Exactly. But looking at modern psychology, it's actually proving that blowing your top isn't a personality trait at all. It's simply a missing skill.
Yeah, a missing skill.
And treating it like this huge moral failing
Yeah.
is exactly what guarantees that you are just going to do it again. So we're taking a really hard look today at how we fundamentally misunderstand anger, frustration, and all those messy emotional blow-ups.
Because the standard playbook for dealing with intense emotions is, honestly, it's actually making the problem worse.
Oh, absolutely.
So we are going to completely dismantle that old playbook today. We're going to look at the biological and the psychological realities of what is really happening in your body when we lose control.
Okay, let's unpack this because we are anchoring this deep dive in the work of clinical psychologist Dr. Becky Kennedy. We're pulling pretty heavily from her frameworks on emotional regulation, along with, some surrounding research on childhood neural wiring, nervous system responses, and trauma.
Yeah, and I think this is crucial because whether you're, say, trying to manage the daily friction of a long-term relationship or you're navigating high-stakes stress in your career or, just trying to understand why a minor inconvenience can completely ruin your morning.
Which happens to all of us.
Totally. The insights we're covering today will fundamentally change how you view your own internal reactions. We're moving away from that heavy judgment and really just examining the actual mechanics of our emotions.
Let's just jump right into the first major insight from Dr. Kennedy's work, which is this big shift from the old paradigm to the new paradigm of emotional regulation. Because the old paradigm treats emotional blow-ups as like the primary disease that just needs to be aggressively eradicated.
Right. Anger is the enemy.
Exactly. It's a bug in the system that needs to be deleted.
The traditional view really operates on this assumption that if the emotion is the disease, then the cure must be suppression. Like, we try to use sheer willpower or punishment or even just social pressure to force that emotion back down.
Just shove it down.
Yeah, but biologically speaking, that is a losing battle.
It really is. And I think the best way to visualize the failure of this traditional approach is to think about the dashboard of a car.
Oh, I love this analogy.
Yeah, it's so clear. So imagine you're driving down the highway and suddenly your check engine light just starts flashing red. It's annoying. It's blaring right there in your peripheral vision.
Very distracting.
Super distracting.
Yeah.
The old paradigm approach to an emotional blow-up is basically taking a hammer and just smashing that flashing check engine light to pieces.
It's shattering the glass on the dashboard.
Right. And then you dust off your hands, you say, okay, problem solved, and you keep driving, completely ignoring the fact that you haven't even popped the hood to look at the engine.
And what's fascinating here is how Dr. Kennedy's work reframes this beautifully. Because those blow-ups, the yelling, the shutting down, that intense, bubbling frustration, they are not the core problem.
Right.
They are the flashing light. They are actually precise, reliable signals that you are encountering a situation that, it exceeds your current capacity to cope. It's a signal of a missing skill.
A missing skill,
Yeah.
not a defective personality.
Exactly. When you reframe an emotional reaction as just a lack of a specific skill, you completely remove all that heavy stigma.
Yeah.
Think about it. When you lack a skill, say, you don't know how to speak French, you don't know how to code,
Yeah.
you don't view yourself as a fundamentally broken, terrible person.
No, of course not. You just say, I don't know French.
Right. You recognize the gap, and then you seek out the training to acquire the skill.
Yeah.
Emotional regulation is honestly no different. It is just a capacity.
And I want you, the listener, to just take a second and think about a recent moment of frustration. Think about the relief in realizing that blowing your top wasn't a character defect. It was just a gap in your emotional skill set. It changes everything.
It's incredibly freeing.
But, knowing that it's a missing skill brings up a pretty massive question. Where is that skill supposed to come from in the first place? Like, if emotional regulation isn't just this innate personality trait that you're either born with or you aren't, how do we get it?
Well, the source material points to a very specific origin, which is that emotional regulation is a capacity learned entirely through relationships.
Through relationships. Okay, break that down for us.
So we are not born with a developed prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain responsible for logic, reasoning, and critically calming the nervous system.
Right, the logical brain.
Yeah. So when a baby is in distress, they are pure amygdala. just a pure blaring alarm system. They literally cannot regulate themselves. So they rely on a caregiver to act as their external prefrontal cortex.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a biological process called co-regulation. The caregiver's calm nervous system literally lends stability to the infant's dysregulated one.
So over thousands and thousands of repetitions, that baby internalizes that external calm. It's like the relationship itself is the classroom where those physical neural pathways for emotional regulation are actually paved.
Precisely. And this brings us to a really crucial concept in Dr. Kennedy's broader work, which is the role of repair. Because in that relational classroom, ruptures are totally inevitable.
As nobody is perfect.
Right. A parent will lose their temper, a caregiver will get distracted and miss a cue, but the rupture itself isn't actually what damages the child's ability to regulate.
Really?
Yeah. The damage happens when there is no repair, when the adult doesn't come back and say, I'm so sorry I yelled, I was feeling overwhelmed, that wasn't your fault. If that doesn't happen, the child's brain has to make sense of this scary rupture all on its own.
Wait, hold on. If all of this neural wiring is paved in our earliest years based on how our caregivers, co-regulated and repaired with us, isn't that just a really depressing flavor of determinism?
How do you mean?
Well, if my parents were, say, chronic yellers, or if they just never modeled repair at all, am I just biologically doomed to scream at my spouse? Because that feels incredibly hopeless.
I hear that, and honestly, that is the immediate fear most people have when they first learn about childhood wiring.
Yeah, it's scary.
But the answer is definitively no. You are absolutely not doomed, and that is because of neuroplasticity. There's this principle, Hebb's law, that states neurons that fire together wire together. So your current default reactions, they are just the pathways that have been fired the most often.
Okay, but those default pathways can be really destructive. Like, the source material talks about this concept of the child who learned to disappear, what is actually happening in the brain there.
Let's look at the mechanics of that because it's so important. Imagine a household where a child's normal anger, or even just their normal needs, are met with explosive rage or really harsh punishment from a parent.
Okay.
For a child whose survival depends entirely on that parent, fighting back is biologically unsafe. So their nervous system adapts.
Yeah.
The brain forms this highly efficient coping mechanism: disappear, become small, become quiet, suppress the need entirely.
Wow.
Yeah. In that specific environment, shutting down was a brilliant, highly adaptive survival strategy.
It kept them safe.
Exactly.
But it's almost like we're trying to run a modern, highly complex adult relationship using emotional software that was downloaded when we were toddlers. Like, we've been running a 2026 application on a legacy operating system from decades ago, and then we wonder why it just keeps crashing.
That is exactly it. The hardware, your brain and your nervous system, is highly capable, but the software is completely outdated and incompatible with your current environment. So that child grows up, they enter a safe adult partnership, and when a normal, healthy conflict arises, their nervous system still registers life-threatening danger. The old software boots up, and they shut down. They disappear emotionally.
Which is so tragic.
It is. Yeah. A mechanism that literally saved them in childhood is now actively destroying their adult connection, which just leaves them feeling totally isolated and inadequate.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Knowing that our emotional software is outdated doesn't actually stop the crash from happening in the moment.
No, it doesn't.
Right. To rewrite that code, we have to look at the tools society usually reaches for first when trying to change behavior, which is shame. And the sources make this counterintuitive, really bold claim. Shame works short-term, but it backfires for life.
Shame is arguably the most misunderstood tool in human psychology. We use it constantly. Like, we shame children to make them comply in the grocery store.
Yeah, or we shame ourselves the entire drive home after snapping at a coworker.
Exactly. The internal logic is always that if we just punish ourselves enough, we will learn our lesson and we will never do it again.
But the biological mechanism of shame proves that logic is completely backwards, right?
Totally backwards. Think about it evolutionarily. Human beings survived by staying in the tribe. Being exiled from the tribe meant certain death. Therefore, the brain processes social rejection and shame using the exact same neural circuitry as physical pain and life-threatening danger.
That is wild.
So when you shame yourself for yelling at your partner, your amygdala interprets that shame as a literal survival threat. It completely floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline.
And when the brain is flooded with cortisol, the prefrontal cortex, the exact part of the brain you actually need to learn a new skill, to reflect, to regulate, that completely shuts down.
Goes totally offline. You are biologically paralyzing your own ability to learn. Shame induces a fear state, and you simply cannot build a new emotional regulation skill in an environment of fear. It is physiologically impossible.
Right, so the bad behavior might stop in the short term.
Only because the nervous system has gone into a freeze response. But the underlying skill hasn't been built at all. You have basically just smashed the check engine light again, and now the engine is actually on fire.
Oh, man. So if we have to take shame completely off the table because it neurologically prevents learning, what is the actual mechanism for building this missing skill? Because Dr. Kennedy talks about this goal of becoming sturdy.
Yes, sturdiness is the ultimate goal, but we really need to move past abstract ideas of what that actually means. Think of sturdiness like the shock absorbers on a car.
Okay.
A rigid suspension system, it just snaps when it hits a pothole, it has absolutely no give, and a fragile system just falls apart. Sturdiness is having the emotional shock absorbers to take the hit of a massive emotion, compress under the weight of it, and rebound without breaking the axle.
I love that. So how do we actually build those emotional shock absorbers? Because the source material points to somatic tools and this framework called internal family systems, or IFS. Let's look at the somatic side first, because we're talking about the hardware of the body.
Right, so somatic interventions target the nervous system directly. When you get triggered, say, you get a passive-aggressive email from your boss, your body doesn't know it's just an email. It reacts as if a predator just walked into the room.
Right. The heart rate spikes.
Your heart rate spikes, your breathing gets shallow, your muscles tense up. You cannot think your way out of the state because, as we said, your thinking brain is offline.
You have to actually speak the language of the body to calm the body.
Exactly. And the language of the body is physiological. So a key somatic tool is the physiological sigh, which is essentially using extended exhales.
Like breathing out longer than you breathe in.
Yes. When you make your exhale longer than your inhale, you are mechanically stimulating the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve runs from your brainstem down through your abdomen. And when it's stimulated, it releases a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which physically acts like a brake pedal on your heart rate.
So you are literally hacking your own hardware. You aren't just telling yourself to calm down. You are forcing the biological mechanisms of calm to activate. And then, once those alarm bells in the body are quieted, the prefrontal cortex comes back online.
Which is when you can utilize the software update.
Right. Which brings us to internal family systems.
Yeah, IFS is a highly effective, incredibly compassionate psychological framework. The traditional view of the mind is that we just have one single unified personality. So when you explode in anger, the internal narrative is, I am an angry person, I failed. But IFS suggests a multiplicity of mind. We are made up of various parts.
Okay, to make this really concrete, instead of saying, I am furious, IFS teaches you to say, a part of me is feeling incredibly furious right now.
Yes, and that tiny shift in language causes a massive shift in brain activity. It's a process called cognitive diffusion. By acknowledging that the anger is just one part of you and not the totality of your identity, you create an observing ego. You mentally step back.
You're no longer blended with the emotion. It's the difference between being consumed by the fire and just sitting in a chair observing the fire in the fireplace. Like you are acknowledging the heat, you are validating that it's there, but you are not letting the fire drive the car.
And notice the mechanical effect this has on shame. If you are not the anger, but you're just observing a part of you that is angry, well, there's no need for shame.
Right, because it's just a part.
Yeah, you can look at that angry part with curiosity instead. You might realize that the angry part is just a piece of that outdated toddler software that's trying to protect you from feeling dismissed or unseen.
Wow. You can literally say to yourself, I see you are trying to protect me, but I have the adult manual now. We are safe. You are actively engaging the prefrontal cortex to soothe the amygdala.
That is the actual structural practice of emotional regulation, but it requires immense repetition. Just like learning French, you don't become fluent in one afternoon. You build these neural pathways through consistent practice. You notice the trigger, you use the somatic exhale to physically lower the heart rate, you use the IFS framework to separate the emotion from your core identity, and then you respond instead of reacting.
So what does this all mean? If we synthesize everything we have covered today, the paradigm shift is pretty profound. Your intense emotions, your blow-ups, your moments of losing your cool, they are not moral failings. They are not character defects.
Not at all.
They're just flashing check engine lights signaling that you are encountering a stressor that exceeds your current emotional skill set.
And because it is a skill, it can be learned.
Yeah.
But it absolutely cannot be learned in an environment of shame. Shame floods the brain with cortisol and actively prevents neuroplasticity. We have to drop that hammer of shame, understand that our current reactions are just outdated software written in our childhood, and then use somatic and cognitive tools to build those emotional shock absorbers.
We have to view our adult relationships as the new relational classroom, where we can practice co-regulation and, honestly, more importantly, practice repair when we inevitably mess up.
Which, brings up a really critical tension when we look at the broader landscape of how we live today.
Oh, yeah.
If emotional regulation is fundamentally a capacity that is learned, practiced, and maintained through relationships through face-to-face friction, rupture, and repair, we really have to look at the mechanics of our modern digital-first world.
Because the environment we're operating in has radically changed.
Radically. I mean, we live in an era where face-to-face conflict is incredibly easy to avoid. We mediate all our friction through screens, text messages, and comment sections. If a conversation gets uncomfortable, we can literally just leave them on read, block them, or swipe away.
Yeah, you just opt out.
Right. And by doing that, we are systematically stripping away the very relational classrooms we need to build and maintain these emotional shock absorbers. If we aren't practicing rupture and repair in real-time physical relationships, we are basically starving our nervous systems of the exact environment required to develop this crucial skill.
That is just a staggering reality to confront. Like, if the skill of emotional regulation is built through human connection and navigating messy real-time friction, and we are just outsourcing our communication to screens that protect us from that friction, I mean, we're essentially guaranteeing a future where we have far fewer tools to handle the stress of reality.
Exactly.
That is absolutely something for all of us to examine really closely as we navigate our remote meetings and text threads this week. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope this has dismantled the old shame-based ways of viewing your reactions and provided a clear, mechanical understanding of how your mind and body actually work.
Yeah, it's all about the mechanics.
So, the next time you feel that intense frustration boiling up, don't grab the hammer. Look into the hood. Keep questioning your emotional check engine lights. Start building those shock absorbers, and we will see you on the next deep dive.